Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time to start off today's episode of the Zach Kroll Sports Podcast after a full week of NFL football with the same way we will start every episode here this football season of the ZKSP with my 10 takeaways of the week. In case you missed it last year, what I would do is each and every episode after an NFL Sunday, I just like to go around the league and give you my 10 main takeaways. I try to hit on every game, just about, if not as many games as possible. And I just love going around the league, even if it's for a couple minutes on each point. So without further ado, boys, hit the music. For the first time this season, it is time for Zach's 10 takeaways of the week. Takeaway number 1. The Urban Meyer experience in Jacksonville didn't get off to that great of a start. And it's crazy because I saw this coming. I didn't expect the Jaguars to get off to that great of a start this season. And all the rumblings I heard throughout training camp told me that this might just be an all-and-out disaster with Urban Meyer and the Jacksonville Jaguars. And when I saw the NFL schedule come out, I saw the Jaguars were playing the Houston Texans. And for the record, props to Tyrod Taylor. The game he played yesterday was one of the better games he's ever played in his career. But with that being said, the bigger story for me in this game was absolutely not about the Houston Texans. It was about Urban Meyer and the Jacksonville Jaguars really just not even showing up to play. And when you go from being a college coach, and for the record, Urban Meyer is one of the best college football coaches I have ever seen. He did such a good job. It is just a different animal. You are coaching guys that make about the same amount, if not more money than you. You are coaching guys who have alpha personalities. And the fact that not only you lost to the Texans, a team that a lot of people are going into this season expecting not to win many football games, you didn't only lose, but you got blown out. The game wasn't even close. And now the USC job is open. Clay Helton gets fired. There are plenty of people who are thinking Urban Meyer might just be the guy for the USC job, considering his history and bailing on certain programs at the worst time. I think Urban Meyer and the Jaguars is not going to work. This reminds me of a hire that was really only made to make the fans happy. What a terrible effort by the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'll give you a team that, in terms of their effort, was the complete opposite of the Jacksonville Jaguars, and that was Justin Herbert and the Los Angeles Chargers. And wow, that was impressive what they were able to do going into our nation's capital in Washington and pulling out the victory. And I was high on both the Chargers and the Washington football team going into the season. These were two teams I expected to make the playoffs, and I think the game on Sunday lived up to the hype. But I was super impressed with the Chargers. Their offensive line behind Rashawn Slater was able to really neutralize the Washington football team's dynamic pass rush, led by Chase Young, Montez Sweat, Jonathan Allen, and the rest of those guys. When you combine the offensive line that the Chargers have, which looks to be much improved, with the elite weapons they have on both sides of the ball, Keenan Allen and Derwin James looked healthy. He looked ready to go. Joey Bosa is an absolute freak of nature. He is unblockable. Austin Eckler looked good, and he wasn't even 100% healthy. He wasn't all full set ready to go. And still, the Chargers were able to win this game because their defense forced a timely turnover at the right time, and Justin Herbert just said, you know what? That's it. I got the ball back. I am not letting my team lose this game, and that's exactly what happened. This kid is an absolute star, and I will say it, the Chargers might just be the biggest threat to the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC. And it is crazy for me to say that because their head coach has only coached one game. But Brandon Staley knows elite talent. He coached Jalen Ramsey. He coached Aaron Donald. He coached Khalil Mack. And with dogs like Joey Bosa, Keenan Allen, Derwin James, Justin Herbert, watch out for the Chargers. That is a scary team. Let's stay in the West And let's talk a little bit about the NFC West. There were plenty of people that going into the season were actually picking the NFC West to get 4 playoff teams in. And not gonna lie, I thought that was pretty crazy, even though I will say from start to finish, the NFC West is the best division in football. And I am still not 100% sure if all 4 teams in this division are going to end up making the playoffs. But what I will say is I don't know if you could have asked for them to get off to a better start, because all of the 49ers, the Cardinals, the Seahawks, and the Rams not only won their Week 1 game, but they looked really impressive doing it. Kyler Murray was slinging the ball all over the field to DeAndre Hopkins and Christian Kirk. Arizona ran a Titan team that a lot of people are really high on completely off the field. We're going to get into the Rams and Matthew Stafford and just how good and dynamic they looked in their win over the Chicago Bears on Sunday Night Football. The Seattle Seahawks, Russell Wilson was dropping absolute dimes against a Colts defense that I'm really high on. I think Seattle and the chemistry shown between Tyler Lockett and Russell Wilson, their defense looked improved. That is a team to watch. And the 49ers, look, I totally understand. They almost suffered a terrible, terrible loss to Detroit. They were up 8, so Detroit would have had to get a touchdown, a 2-point conversion, and then ultimately win the game in overtime. But in the first 3 quarters of that game, Jimmy Garoppolo looked good. He was hitting Deebo Samuel all across the field. I think Deebo Samuel, as long as he stays healthy, should be a really good player. Hopefully Brandon Ayuk is okay. They get him involved. Hopefully Raheem Mostert gets better, but this kid, Elijah Mitchell, looks like the real deal. I was super impressed with every team in the NFC West. Watch out for that division. Takeaway number 4. I am absolutely embarrassed of the Green Bay Packers' performance. They should be embarrassed because I really don't know what that was. And I totally understand. Going into this game, it was some weird circumstances. We know that this game to start was originally supposed to take place in New Orleans, but due to the tough circumstances of Hurricane Ida, that was not able to happen. I hope everyone in New Orleans is doing okay and much better. So this game took place in Jacksonville. But these 2 teams knew that this game was going to be in Jacksonville for about 2 weeks. And one team showed up. Sean Payton had his New Orleans Saints ready to play, and I was really impressed with Jameis Winston. What he was able to do, swinging the ball all over the field, having 5 touchdowns, really showing us that unlike the Saints of years past with Drew Brees, who was really only able to complete the ball no longer than 20 yards, Jameis Winston, with a battered receiving core, no Michael Thomas, Traquan Smith gets hurt in this game. He looked really good. Good for the Saints. But screw the Packers, man. I don't know how you show up after you just got your heart taken out of your stomach the last football game you played in, the NFC Championship game, and you didn't even show up for this game. You let the New Orleans Saints just run all over you. The Packers looked like a soft team that was unprepared, and in my opinion, the worst possible insult you could give an NFL football team is that straight up they just weren't ready to play. That is unacceptable, especially for a team as good and as talented as the Green Bay Packers. I'm not going to lie, if I'm a cheesehead, I'm absolutely fuming at the way my team played on Sunday. Good for the Saints. Takeaway number 5. The Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes in September are an absolute cheat code. And the crazy thing about this game was that I don't even think the Chiefs played particularly well. I think Cleveland Browns and Kevin Stefanski, they actually came into this game with a pretty good game plan. And Baker Mayfield, for the first 3 quarters of this game, played really well. I was actually impressed. But at the same time, when you're playing a team like the Kansas City Chiefs, they are just so hard to beat even when you play well. The Cleveland Browns thought they had them, just like they probably thought they had them in that playoff game last year. But Patrick Mahomes, given his history, it doesn't even matter. Everyone in the building knew that in that second half, the Kansas City Chiefs were going to have to throw the football. They had no choice. That was going to be their only possible way to to get back in this football game. And guess what? It still didn't even matter. Patrick Mahomes, with just one flick of the wrist, was able to find Tyreek Hill for the big touchdown. Unfortunately for Cleveland, their punter botched that snap, and the game really changed from there. I was so impressed with Kansas City's ability, even when they didn't even play that well of a game, to come back, respond, and somehow, some way, pull out the victory over what I think is actually a very good Cleveland Browns team. If you're a Browns fan, you shouldn't panic. I think your team is going to win the AFC North. I think your team is going to win a whole lot of football games. But my issue with Cleveland is this. As much as I love Baker Mayfield, and I think he is a guy that is capable of beating some decent teams, and he could win regular season games. He showed us that last year. I think he's going to be able to do that this year. When you need him to make the big throw, I'm just not sure if he is able to do that. Good for Kansas City. Cleveland, that is going to be a game that is remembered with them for a long time. Hopefully, if you're a Browns fan, it doesn't cost you too much going forward. Takeaway number 6. Jets and Panthers. This is what happens when you give Sam Darnold legitimate help. He has a running game in Christian McCaffrey. He has really good wide receivers in DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. He has a really good head coach in Matt Rule. He has a really good offensive coordinator with Joe Brady. And all of these things that he had in Carolina, that is exactly what he didn't have in New York. And anyone who was paying attention during that time should realize that Sam Darnold was really never given a fair shot as the quarterback of the New York Jets. And of course, it's super ironic in Week 1 seeing the Panthers go up against the Jets. And even though I do think the kid Zach Wilson showed some decent signs, the Jets didn't really give him a chance in this game. They couldn't block, and the Panthers' defense was good. They were relentless. They got to the quarterback. They took advantage of the Jets' putrid offensive line. And I said it before the season, Carolina was my surprise playoff team in the NFC. I predicted them to finish ahead of New Orleans and win about 10 games and be one of the wild cards in the NFC behind Tampa Bay, and I am not going away from that pick yet. I think Sam Darnold is a talented quarterback. He's not perfect. He was not a good New York Jet at all. They made the right choice to get rid of him and move on. But at the same time, he should not have been given up on across the NFL. Carolina made the right decision bringing him in. I think with the proper help, with the proper weapons, which he has, Carolina could be a real sweeper team. Huge game for them next week at home against Jameis Winston and the Saints. Takeaway number 7. The Pittsburgh Steelers defense reminded us that they're one of the few defensive teams in football that are good enough to win a game by themselves. And I'm not going to lie, this was one of my surprises of the weekend, because one of the main storylines going into this season and really this week 1 was fans were back in the stands. That is one part that, as great as the 2020 season was, having sports back, we really missed the fans in the crowd, especially in the NFL. We were able to see over the past couple weeks just how electric a lot of these college football stadiums and crowds were. But Bills Mafia in upstate New York, I thought was going to be the best one. The Bills only lost one game at home last year, and it was to an elite offense in Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. We know historically how Buffalo has really struggled against Kansas City. But Pittsburgh, their defense is good. We knew that. And they decided to pay TJ Watt. I think we were able to see in this game he was worth every single penny the Steelers gave him. But last year, as good as the Steelers' defense was, there were very few big games, I thought, that they just showed up to, took advantage of how good their defense was, and they weren't able to win games. They weren't able to make the big play because of their defense. Last year, when the Steelers were good and they were starting off 11-0, Ben Roethlisberger was actually probably the main reason why. He was an MVP candidate, I think, until like week 9, week 10 of last year. Excuse me. And I think the Steelers towards the end of the season, were really limited offensively. Big Ben ran out of gas. Yesterday, the Steelers' defense went up against an elite offense and were able to say, it's okay, offense, and Ben Roethlisberger. If you can't move the ball, fine. The defense has this game covered. What an effort for the Steelers, and that is a statement win going into Buffalo and getting the job done. TJ Watt is the definition of unblockable. Takeaway number 8. How great was it to have primetime games back in the NFL? And the two games that I am referring to in particular was the opening night Thursday night football game between the Dallas Cowboys and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That was a classic, back and forth, I think in a similar way to how I mentioned about Kansas City and Cleveland. You could have just made the argument that Dallas played about as well as they possibly could, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I think that Dak looked much better than anyone could have really ever expected. He looked comfortable, and the Cowboys did a good job taking advantage of what was a depleted Tampa Bay Buccaneers secondary, and they were able to get the win. They were able to show up and put up points. Good for Dallas. But at the same time, even though they were not able to get the win, they showed up well. It didn't even matter. Tampa Bay, Tom Brady with less than 2 minutes. Boom, 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 down the field, game-winning field goal for Ryan Suckup, and the Buccaneers steal a game which they easily could have lost. A lot of Cowboy fans are feeling good. I don't know if I could trust their team going forward. Obviously, the quarterback situation in Washington is going to be one to monitor. I actually think Taylor Heinicke had a legitimate argument to be the Washington football team's starting quarterback to start off the season based on how good he played in that playoff game last year against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But what are you going to do? Good for the Buccaneers getting the win. And that primetime game between the Raiders and the Ravens, we're going to get into it later in the show. That was one of the better Monday Night Football games I've ever watched. Good for Derek Carr. That is a guy who is very easy to root for. John Gruden, that was a game the Raiders needed. And once again, stay tuned because I think the Baltimore Ravens could be in trouble based on just how exactly they lost the game, how exactly the injuries have gone down to start training camp, losing Marcus Peters and J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and Justice Hill. I feel terrible for the Ravens, but that was a big-time win for the Raiders. Takeaway number 9, let's get to the Sunday night game. Speaking of primetime games, and we're going to get into the Rams and what exactly I think this game meant for Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay a little bit later in the show. But the Bears have to start Justin Fields now, right? I guess, and I'm very hesitant when I say this, I guess I could understand the Chicago Bears' decision to start Andy Dalton week 1 on Sunday Night Football against this ferocious Rams defensive line in front of this Chicago Bears offensive line that a lot of people didn't expect to be particularly good going into the season. I don't think they played terribly in this game against the Los Angeles Rams, but the bottom line is this. Andy Dalton was just a statue. He didn't make enough big throws, and Justin Fields needs to be starting at quarterback under center for the Chicago Bears from here on out. I think it's never been easier for young quarterbacks to enter the league and be comfortable and play right away than it is right now in the NFL. Justin Fields is a guy who I think his game is fit perfectly for the modern day NFL. He's quick, he's athletic, he's mobile, and I do think even in front of this terrible Bears offensive line, he needs to be the Bears starting quarterback going forward. If you're the Bears, you need to give yourself as much evidence and as much tape as you possibly can while evaluating this kid, Justin Fields, and that has to start this week in week 2 against the Bengals. Soldier Field was on fire during the preseason when they saw Andy Dalton, that quarterback. They were chanting, "We want Fields. We want Fields." In the first game back at Soldier Field in over a year with fans, they're going to be on Matt Nagy to play Justin Fields. And if Andy Dalton struggles on Sunday against the Cincinnati Bengals, Justin Fields may just be the quarterback, and Matt Nagy just may not have a choice. And takeaway number 10, what could have been the most impressive team of the week, in my opinion, it was the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, Jalen Hurts, a guy who I'll admit, I wasn't 100% sure that he could be an NFL starting quarterback in this league. He looked really good against the Falcons. He looked super dynamic. And the Eagles, I thought, going into the season, were one of the trickier teams to figure out just because of their personnel. It was a mix of talent and youngsters and experience. And their head coach, Nick Sirianni, I didn't love how he handled himself at the microphone to start off his tenure as head coach of the Eagles. He had some Jim Tomsula vibes to me, some Dan Campbell vibes. But hey, he looked like he was a pretty capable head coach on Sunday. And how about the Atlanta Falcons? I mean, I thought that Arthur Smith, a guy who was a very good coordinator in Tennessee, I think he did a great job helping out Ryan Tannehill and really fixing that Tennessee Titans offense, making that offense one of the more dynamic units in the NFL. But man, as a head coach, that really was not the start you wanted to get off to. And the Falcons are still the Falcons, man. They have a tough Week 2 game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and to get blown out like that at home against the Philadelphia Eagles, that is just not an ideal way to start off your tenure. But good for the Eagles. Jalen Hurts looks like he may just be the answer at quarterback in Philadelphia. Miles Sanders ran the ball really well. The Eagles' defense came to play. Good for Philadelphia, man. That is the definition of a season statement to start the season. Well, boys, it was a great segment. Without further ado, let's move on to the later parts of the Zach Kroll Sports Podcast.